You are watching the multi-awarded Radio Bandido TV on channel 224 Sky Cable and TV Plus boxes. Simulcast on DZRJ 8:10 a.m. Informing, advising, and entertaining the Filipinos and OFWs around the world. Streaming live on www.facebook.com/DZRJ 8:10 a.m. or on YouTube, channel DZRJ 8:10 a.m. Radio Bandido.
The views and comments of the hosts and guests are not necessarily those of the station.
Hello, Philippines, and welcome to the World News Jam right here on DZRJ and Radio Bandito TV. My name is Lecain, and I am joined yet again this week with attorney 𝗪cie.
Hello, good morning, everyone.
Hello, Vaughn.
Nice to be back.
I'm so happy to have you again. Vaughn was with us last week. He is a Filipino attorney who is currently working in the United States, but he's here in the Philippines now.
Yes.
Again, just for everybody to know, so what type of attorney are you, again, there in the United States?
I do a little bit of everything, Eric. Most primarily do personal injury right now, but I've experience with bankruptcy and small claims. I'm registered in Wisconsin, so I can practice in that state, also in some federal courts across the nation.
So if you are a Filipino and you're in the United States and you need a good Filipino lawyer, Vaughn is your guy.
I'm here. I can also help with immigration, so hit me up.
All right, so we're not promoting Vaughn in any way, but I'm just saying. But you know, it's great having not just a Filipino, but a Filipino has some experience, some world experiences around it. So we really enjoy what Vaughn has to say. And Vaughn and I kind of want to get to it because there's just so much news that happened this week. But in case anybody doesn't know, many people out there know that I am a volleyball player, or we used to be a volleyball player, now I'm kind of a volleyball teacher. And Vaughn also plays beach volleyball. But I remember the first guy that really inspired me to really play beach volleyball, and that was Val Kilmer. I don't know about you, but Val Kilmer, of course, was in the movie Top Gun, which has that great beach volleyball scene where they play beach volleyball. But although I do understand that was not even Val Kilmer, it was his double that actually played. But what I want to talk about is we didn't get to this story last week, and so I just wanted to say it this week is, you know, generally in the show we talk about famous people that I like that have passed away. Val Kilmer passed away this week at the age of 65, I believe. He died of pneumonia. He had a lot of problems. In case you don't know, Val Kilmer, he was in Top Gun, and he was in the Maverick, the remake. He was in The Doors, Batman, Willow, Real Genius, which I loved that movie when I was a kid. Anyway, for all those people out there, fans of Val Kilmer, he had cancer, which he didn't even tell anybody for a long time. And he finally admitted that in 2017 that he had beaten the cancer. But it turns out he initially had refused treatment because he's a Christian Scientist, or he believes in Christian Scientists, which is not Scientology. It's like a little slightly different, but they do believe that the power of prayer they use that over medicine. They believe that prayer cures the illusion of the physical ill health that you may have. But except there's some exceptions, not in the case of dentistry or broken bones or obstetrics, stuff like that. But anyway, even though that was his religion, he eventually decided to do chemotherapy. He had 2 tracheotomies, and that made it so he couldn't speak. Now, if we remember, did you see Maverick? Did you see the movie Maverick?
No, this is probably aging me a little bit, but I only know Kilmer from Batman. From
Batman?
Yeah.
A little young. Maverick, which is the movie that I think it came out year before last. I think it's the remake of Top Gun, or the extension of Top Gun when they're all older, and they rewrote that movie around the fact that Val Kilmer had throat cancer, and they made him have throat cancer in the movie, and that's why he doesn't speak to Tom Cruise at the beginning of the movie. He uses that little thing because he has throat cancer in the movie, but he actually has throat cancer in real life. But after a battle with that, 𝗪𝗀𝗱 finally succumbed. It was a week before last. And so, that's just every once in a while here on the show, we talk about people, especially actors that I like.
Right.
But there are some interesting death anniversaries, since we're on the subject of death. Adolf Hitler.
Oh my gosh.
Adolf Hitler's death is coming up this week, the anniversary of his death. So if you want to celebrate Adolf Hitler's death, also Charles Darwin.
Okay. We're going up. We're going up
the
the
heavens
map.
with Albert Einstein.
Okay.
Albert Einstein will be celebrating his death, and Prince, who was also one of my favorite musicians there, will be celebrating their death anniversary here in April. But Vaughn, I want to get your thoughts on something that is just, sometimes, and we'll get to the news. We're getting to the big stories here in a bit, but sometimes I read a lot. I read a lot of news. And there is this one picture this week that has been shown everywhere. I have never seen a picture so many times. And it turns out that this is one of the most looked at pictures of the week. And when I read the story that went to the picture, because I kept seeing the picture over and over. So finally I went to the story and I read the story and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is a story about this man who got on a New York subway, and it was about 8 p.m. Okay. And in New York, you've been in New York.
Yes, I lived there for a couple of summers.
Okay, so obviously everybody uses the New York subway there. Nobody drives there because the subway, it's so easy, it's cheap, it's fast. Unless you're super famous, you take the subway. And so this guy got on the subway. And you can see in the CCTV cameras that there was a woman that came over and gave him a cigarette. And then after he smoked the cigarette, he passed out. And they still don't know what that's about yet. But he passed out. And so the woman robbed him. She took his stuff out of his, clothes and everything. And then she left the train. The guy stayed on the train. People just
do we know which train?
The R train. He was on the R train.
That's going all the way to, is that?
The R train is really long.
Yes.
It goes from Brooklyn up around, goes around in Manhattan and goes into Queens.
Yeah.
So it's a super long train. So anyway, this other guy got on the train and he came over and he tried to rob him. Now they believe that at this time the guy may have already expired. Anyway, when they found him, he was passed away. He was dead. Yeah, he was dead. And that happens. I've been in New York when somebody dies on the train. It happens every week. Somebody gets on the train and passes away. They don't know what that whole business is. They're looking for the girl as well. But this other guy got on the train and he tried to rob him. But obviously the girl had already robbed him. So after that, the guy then decided to have sexual relations with the guy. And he was already passed away. So the police have taken this guy's picture and put it everywhere. So if you've seen this guy that is on every website around that I use, that is AP, CNN, even some foreign websites that I look to, this guy's picture is everywhere and they want to get him because the guy that was on the train had already passed away, and this guy did stuff with him. And so, they actually give you very explicit details, which I'm not going to read here on the thing. But police are really trying to do this. But they know who the guy is because there's no way. If they see your picture, they're going to figure it out pretty soon. So they figured it out. And they went to his house. They talked to his brother, and his brother said he hadn't seen him in days. Obviously, the guy knows his picture is everywhere. And his brother said, "Oh no, it could have been him. It could have. I can't believe what they're saying." There's a video. There's a video of the guy. Anyway, so turns out the guy just got out of prison and he's into heroin. He's a really bad dude. So, but anyway, this kind of there's no specific question I have on this, but it kind of leads to another story, which I really wanted to get to today. And it's not in the main news, but it is in the news about something that happened in Korea this week. And it's about a woman that this incident happened in 1964 This is a long time ago, but you'll see the story leads up to right now this week. But she was walking, and this man came up and asked her for directions, and she gave him directions. She walked with him a little bit and pointed out where to go, and then turned and started to walk away. And he tackled her, and she hit the ground, and she went unconscious. And when she came to, he was on top of her, and he was obviously trying to, sexually assault her. And so he was forcing her to kiss him. And so the way that she got away from him is she bit off his tongue. So anyway, he came later to her house. He found out who she was, because obviously this was a big issue. Right. And then came to where she was and said, listen, I'm going to get you, if you don't do what I say, then we're going to kill your father. This is Korea, 1964. So he ended up suing her for biting his tongue. So they ended up dropping the rape case and putting her in jail for assaulting him. Now, the reason that this has come up is, and we had Women's Month here just last month, is and this is we've talked about here before, that in Asia, a lot of times if you are assaulted, that's it. There's nothing you can do about it. In a lot of Asian countries, you can go to court, but in many times you won't get very far in court, because men have a certain consideration. Exactly. When it comes to women. But the reason I wanted to talk about this story is because even though this happened a long time, this woman is 78 years old now, and she has taken it upon herself, because she has seen this happen over and over again, and she's taken it upon herself to take this to the Supreme Court of Korea and have that verdict overturned from 1964. And so she actually tried to appeal it in the court that she was originally charged in, and they wouldn't take the appeal. And so she went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said this week that she has the right to appeal this conviction. And if she's able to appeal this conviction, this could have ramifications over the way the courts look at these cases all over Asia, especially Korea. And so that's why I wanted to bring it up.
Right.
Is because, I know, because especially because you're a lawyer, and I just wanted you to make a comment on the way the system works, especially here when it comes to women being assaulted.
Right. So obviously it's a sensitive topic out there. So I guess trigger warning to the listeners or watchers.
I know. And I was worried about doing it at the front of the show. Right. But I've been so enthralled with this story. I have literally not done justice to the story. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you go to the web and read the entire story, it is something. I mean, what this woman has gone through to get to this point. I mean, it is really, it's really amazing. So that's why I just wanted to bring it up.
Yeah, this is a very intense story, and then you mentioned the procedural history of it. So that's what, 70 years ago, almost 70. Yeah, I mean, that's insanely long.
78 now. I mean,
right.
It's actually when I was born. So it's 60 years ago this happened, wow. And it's just now.
Right. So you can just imagine, for I guess a progressive country like Korea, relatively progressive than most of the Asian countries, it took decades to get to that point. And it's not even about, whether she was raped or not, or whether it was self-defense or not. It was about whether she's able to appeal. It's not the substance of, the case. It's more the procedural thing. So it just really goes to show how difficult it is for sexual assault survivors, mostly women and men, to really go after their assaulters in court, because one, it's lengthy, and two, most of the time in Asian countries, especially in Southeast Asia, the court is very slow. So it could take very, very, very long. And on the lawyer's perspective side too, if somebody came up to me and confessed or even mentioned that I was hurt because I was trying to hurt somebody, I think that goes to your moral compass as a lawyer, whether you take it or not. And to go with this guy for that long is jarring to say the least, because it's really hard to bring forward that kind of case, knowing that your client is maybe in the wrong or mostly in the wrong.
Yeah, so. She fought him by biting off the end of his tongue when he was trying to assault, and so you would think, all right, she would be the hero, but she wasn't the hero. In fact, this really harmed her. I mean, if you read the whole story, I mean, this really did a lot, really harmed her life a lot. And they lived in fear for years after this was over, because in Korea at that time, I mean, if you try and bring an assault case against a man, that just isn't, that's just unheard of. That's just unheard of. So she's decided, she just can't, even though she's at the end of her life, she wants to clear her name.
Right.
And she wants this verdict overturned. Now, is the guy going to get found guilty of rape? No, I'm sure that's not going to happen even at this point. But I think it's just the fact that she would be able to get some. I mean, the fact right now that this is big news in Korea. And then there are a lot of people that are standing by her. It's not the way it used to be now. Like I say, Korea is becoming a little bit more. But the fact that the Supreme Court overturned the lower court and said, yes, she does have the right to have herself heard in court, and the possibility of overturning this verdict.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it too comes from grassroots movements from women's rights activists, which is we've seen significant increase of presence across Asian countries. Not so much about in Korea, I would say, maybe mostly Japan, but I remember seeing during the Me Too movement several years ago. Seoul was a city that was really I guess affected by it too. They really resonate with the sentiment of the Me Too movement. They have protests that happen to themselves, and just the pressure of being a woman in Korean society. There's a lot of beauty standards imposed up against them. So we start to see a lot of women's rights activists, trying to shift the narrative, trying to control it a little bit, and put some strength behind. The being a woman is not really easy. So there's sort of empowerment, that empowering movement that's going on throughout the world, and I think Korea is a part of that movement.
Yeah, I mean that's why I did. Even though this might not be in the top 10 stories, I just thought it was a very interesting story to talk about, especially because in the Philippines recently they it's a lot of stuff here for Women's Month, and it's been a big week. But speaking of that, we're going to switch over to the world news now. This is Eric Gade along with attorney Vaughn here on DZRJ and Radio Bandito TV. And, Vaughn, I hate to bring this up, but because we talked about it last week, but unfortunately, the news is progressive and it is progressing the same story over and over. But, we just can't get away from this tariff subject. It just keeps following us around, and there is a tariff war. And this week, somebody blinked. In fact, some of us are saying maybe the tariff war was lost before it was even got started. But anyway, here's kind of what happened. The U.S. finances itself and its debts by selling bonds. This is it's always been done this way. But this crazy tariff war has sparked a sell-off of U.S. bonds. And this is where it gets scary. Now, we're not going to get into technicalities of this, but just so you know, this was a really big deal because, the bonds really will, decide about the future markets. And if you have not seen the U.S. stock market recently, as I have, who has seen it literally every hour of every day of the week, and I can't stop looking at it because my whole retirement is based on the U.S. stock market. But anyway, and it's taken a dive. It did do a little bit of a jump, but not a lot. Like it went way down and then it came up this much. But it turns out this week there was a sell-off of bonds. But the problem is nobody wants them because nobody knows what the U.S. is going to do next. So this is bad. So Trump's people, some of his biggest donors and some of his people came in and said, you may be, they talked to us, you might be ruining the U.S. economy. And so Trump has backed off a little bit, a tiny bit. He put a pause. He's always pause. If I can count the number of pauses that we've had since this tariff started, because we started it, then we against Canada and Mexico, then we paused, then we put it back on, then we paused again, back on, pause.
I think at this time it's like 100 day. Is it 100?
90 day.
90
day pause. 90 day pause. Which to these days it almost becomes almost meaningless. So anyway, he's dropped everybody's down to 10%, which I'm still trying to make sense of 10%. Where do you get that number from? And also, there's no tariffs on smartphones and computers.
Okay.
That's the new thing. And you know why I think that is? I think because somebody told Trump, or Trump saw it on the TV, that if we begin to make smartphones like iPhones, if we make iPhones in the United States, then each iPhone is going to cost $30,000. So there's a reason, so it's like, okay, well, wait a minute. We don't want iPhones to cost $30,000. So because then we're going to have to go back to flip phones.
Okay.
So anyway, and the reason for that, and obviously iPhones are made in China. So anyway, to make a long story short, Trump, of course, claimed victory. Then he said, oh, look, everybody's coming after me because they want to make a deal. In a way, Vaughn, it reminds me of, you set the house on fire, and then later you come in a fire truck with a hose and you spray water on it, and you say, I'm a hero because I put out the fire, even though I'm the one that started the fire. And meanwhile, when all this is going on, Trump is playing golf. You just gotta love it. So I've often wanted to talk to some people, especially Filipinos, about this, because it looks to me obviously like he's just trying to bully people. Here again, we are not a partisan show. I'm never going to say Trump is a bad president, but it does seem to me like he is kind of trying to bully the world. He's not trying to do this to really set off a tariff war. He's just trying to get people to take the knee.
Right. Actually, it's last week we talked about it, and I believe I mentioned something about, waiting for different people or communities around the world to react to it. And now that he's backtracking it, I feel like the reaction will be different again. Trump controls a lot of media outlets, or at least has an influence in a lot of major media outlets that have, covers a lot of many parts of the world. And the way they're trying to spin this backtracking as like a victory is quite frankly important for him to really establish his image, because, a tariff and world economics is not an easy thing to understand and to learn. And a lot of the times, people, in the common people will only learn about it when they feel the effects.
Yes.
But now I don't think the effects will be as bad as we initially thought before he backed down. But I feel like people are bracing for it. People are kind of like just waiting and then seeing what will happen. But now I think it's kind of changed a little bit. And the way that his team is really twisting it and then making them as the hero of this story is, funny, but at the same time, again, quite dangerous.
Yeah, when he did it, when he finally backed off, which, by the way, now we know how to get Trump to back down. Don't sell his bond. Don't buy his bonds. Don't buy U.S. bonds. And when he sees it, I was like, oh my goodness! That literally is the catalyst. Now, if you sell all your U.S. bonds, and he'll go, okay, let's make a deal. But I mean, the interesting thing is people. They come on Fox News and go, you see the incredible, brilliant move that Trump made this week by dropping the tariffs to 10% and putting the 90-day hold on it. Isn't he brilliant for doing something like this? This is going to make us the richest country ever. And it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to swallow, but I know a lot of people do swallow it. Right. They listen to it and they swallow it. And I mean, I think a lot of people they don't quite grasp what this is about, because Trump constantly says everybody's ripping us off. The Philippines is ripping us off. Mm-hmm. And the reason the Philippines is ripping us off is we sell more to the Philippines than the Philippines sells to us. And the difference of that number is the percentage of their tariff. Now, does that make sense to anybody? Because it doesn't make sense to me, or even the best economists. It doesn't matter about me, but the best economists, they go, this is just insane. That we've been doing this for for a very long time, this whole thing about, you sell us this much. Now, some countries actually have a trade surplus. They sell more to us than we buy of them. You still put tariffs on them anyway. So I don't know. A lot of it doesn't make sense to a lot of people. And when I say it doesn't make sense to a lot of people, I mean everybody. I mean, you flip on the TV, the only people it seems to make sense to are the Trump people, yet they can't explain it. Like what is the end goal? Like what would be the final goal? Because right now, this has put the United States in a weird predicament. And here's why. Maybe I can explain it and you can comment on this. There was a boat, a ship with natural gas that was going from the United States to China. And the Trump people were saying to China, you need to call us. You need to call us. And China's like, why? Why do we need to call you? I mean, right now, they did an insane tariff on China, which we'll get to in a second. But this ship coming across the Pacific carrying natural gas going to China, actually it'd be this way, taking natural gas to China. And China goes, you know what? We don't need it. Just take it back. We'll get our own gas from somebody. And in the matter of a few days, they made a deal with Australia to get natural gas from Australia. This is where I think that Trump didn't see this coming, because this kind of thing is not going to be over in a week. That specific example this is how the world is going to be changing in the next couple of months, next half a year. And I think that is something that they didn't expect it to go this fast. I think he thought he was going to do all these things and that everybody would bow to him. And then he has the power over the world. And it just didn't go that way. And now China's like, listen, all right, we don't need your natural gas. We don't need anything from you. Just keep it. And so that is going to throw off the world economy, I think, for more than just a week.
Right. I think there's the repercussions of these events and this tariff showdown, I would call it, is really will be felt for decades. And it's going to be difficult to, I guess, reverse that course of action, knowing now, especially the public know that a lot of things that are in the US are subsidized by the world. So it's going to be, I don't know if I want to call it exciting or scary, but well, I guess we'll just have to wait and see how it pans out.
I mean, the thing is, okay, so everybody's been dropped to 10% for 90 days, but we're going to go after China anyway, because I think what Trump thought is that everybody's going to rally around him against China. This has not happened. And China says, listen, we're not backing down. China's not going to back down. Yeah. China will starve to death before it will back down in these tariffs things. They will let their country bleed before they'll
I don't know if it's even possible, but I get
they're going to do this. And so China said, listen, all right, listen, we're going to up your tariff. And then Trump's like, well, we're going to up your tariff. And they said, well, then we're up your tariff. And then, before we know it, we're at 125% tariffs in China and 145% tariffs in the United States. Those don't make any sense. In fact, China even came out this week and he says, listen, let's make it it doesn't matter what the number, 1,000%. It doesn't matter. We're not even going to listen to you anymore. And the Trump people are saying, listen, you need to call us. We need to call us. We're not going to call you.
Right.
And this is where I think they're like, oh, crap, maybe we shouldn't have done this after all. Because now we're looking at 125%, 145%. I mean, if that is the case, then the farmers in the United States, some farmers who have no other customer but China, all of a sudden have no customer at all. So what are they going to do? They can't say 125%. They're not going to pay 125% tariff on, farming goods. And the same way coming to, what's going to happen when a Barbie doll costs $80? Who's going to buy a Barbie doll? And China's like, listen, we don't need to sell to the United States. We'll just sell to other people. Other people like crap. The United States is the biggest buyer of crap in the world. When I mean crap, I mean things that you don't need to live. You don't need Barbie dolls and you don't need electric, Jeeps, toy Jeeps and things. And all this stuff is made in China. As well as things that are made in the United States where the parts come from China, appliances and things like that. And so if all of a sudden China says, listen, we don't need the United States anymore, we'll just sell to Japan, or we'll just sell to Australia, or we'll sell to all the Europeans, and then the Europeans won't need to go to the United States anymore. Then all of a sudden, now the United States is Brexit. They are exit, whatever American Brexit would be called.
They Brexited themselves.
Yeah, they Brexited themselves. And then, what are they going to do now? How is the United States going to produce Barbie dolls? They're not set up to do that. First thing, the Barbie doll would cost a fortune. That's what they were saying. If we made iPhones in the United States, the iPhones would cost $30,000. Right. And they did the math in front of you. This is what a US person costs. This is what a Chinese person costs. This is why they're made in China, so that we can buy them in the United States, which is why places like Walmart exist. They sell cheap stuff because we buy cheap stuff in China because it cannot be made in the United States. And this is where the whole thing is about to just, a nuclear economic explosion is about to happen.
Yeah, and I think China really has started to respond. I believe recently I'm not sure it's been enacted yet, but they're thinking of removing copyright protections for a lot of American goods. I am on TikTok like many other millennials, and I'm starting to see a lot of Chinese influencers explaining how a lot of these luxury goods are made for less than 1% of the cost that they sell in the US. So we are already starting to see how suddenly China is kind of like, playing America in their own game, which is social media, which is very clever and smart. And I remember seeing this clip. I don't exactly if it's a news station or not, but I believe somebody from a Chinese spokesperson was talking to a British economist expert. He was basically saying that, China has existed for 5,000 years without America. And he was like, I'm pretty sure we'll be okay without you. And I was like, you know what? That's so true. So I think this is like, poking the sleeping giant. I think not a lot of Americans or even people in the global north really understand the importance of China in the capitalist part of the world, because I thought it was just like some sort of rumor growing up, because when I was growing up here in the Philippines, there's some stories about like, oh yeah, that T-shirt, it's actually made in China, and then they just ship it off somewhere and then put the branding on it. I thought that was kind of like a myth. And I went to law school, studied patent, copyright law, international trade law, and I started to see that's actually not a myth. That's actually really true. The way things are made in certain countries, a lot of it are controlled by, by the Western legal systems. So you may think that something is made in China or Italy or France, but parts of it or the components of it is actually made somewhere else.
Which is why I always found it so interesting that a lot of Apple products, made in Singapore. So if it's made in Singapore, and the parts, they're assembled in Singapore, the parts are made in China. If an Apple laptop is made there and it's shipped to the United States, but it's way cheaper in the United States. But if you buy it in the Philippines, which is just an hour and a half plane ride, it's way more expensive. It's way more expensive. And this is why this exclusivity that America has with Chinese industry, if that goes away, that is going to kill the United States market. If all of a sudden, for right now, we have to import stuff from the United States, but it's made in China and imported from the United States. It costs us a fortune here, that we got to pay the taxes and the VATs and everything that comes into the Philippines. If we're getting it directly from China, it's like, for instance, you're talking about T-shirts, and this is kind of funny, but yeah, it goes, Nike is an American company, goes there, and then, you can buy Nike from the United States. It's going to cost you a fortune to buy it in the Nike store. But what if China just shipped us the Nike shirts? What if they just ignored the deals that they have with all these big companies? And I don't put it past China. when I heard the guy that you were talking about speaking, the Chinese Commerce Secretary, who was making that comment about the 5,000 years.
Yeah.
He also made the comment about how stupid the vice president is. Jesus Christ!
I love the guy.
that guy is very fun. I mean, he's funny. He's funny. He's a serious guy, but I mean, he's kind of funny to listen to him talk about this, because he's like, if America wants to do this, we don't. He says, you want to make it 145%? We don't care. You can make it anything you want. We really don't care. We'll just sell to somebody else. And I think that is, and right now the United States is desperately trying to get allies to surround itself, to kind of stop what they started, the fire that they started, that burning the house. And the Trump administration, they're, calling and begging for deals. Now, the Trump administration says that, countries are calling them. 70-some countries are calling us, begging us for a deal, but they won't tell us what countries they are. The U.S. Treasury Secretary is saying that Japan and South Korea and India and Vietnam all coming to the table, all want to stand with the U.S. Let me say, it's China that is trying to sell off all their bonds this week, so I don't know if that's really true. But what he said was, everyone is coming to the table, and basically China is surrounded. The joint goal, how do we get China to rebalance? That is the big win here. But, honestly, I don't see the other countries doing this. But the White House press secretary, just to add insult to injury here, was asked on Friday, why would anyone want to help the United States? Because the United States is currently treating everybody like an enemy. Even the people that Australia, who's always been our friend, Canada, Mexico, I mean, these places are our friends, and we're treating them like enemies. And she said, you'll have to talk to our allies who are reaching out to us. The phones are ringing off the hook. This is according to her. They have made it very clear that they need the United States of America. They need our markets. They need our consumer base. Now, that is not entirely untrue. It's true. There are a lot of countries out there that need the U.S. consumer base, but that is because it's always just been the U.S. consumer base. But now it could very well be another consumer base. And so I think that's where things are kind of getting scary. And let me just say, Vaughn, and then I'll throw it over and let you comment on this one part, but they're saying now that they want all these countries to surround the United States, back the United States against China. What the heck was the Trans-Pacific Partnership that Trump got himself out of back in 2017? I was thinking about this the other day, that, we had a whole thing set up to protect trade practices against China. It was called the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And then Trump pulled the United States out of that because he said it wasn't fair to the United States. So he left the Europeans and the Japanese and the Koreans all to deal with it themselves. And since then, he's threatened to take over Canada. He wants to annex Canada, and he says, we may just do it. So who's going to unite with the United States now? Which is my question, is with all these things going on, I'm just baffled by the fact that they believe that the world is going to unite and protect the United States.
Yeah, it's very strange to hear that kind of rhetoric, on like an international level scale, In the international legal community, you look at America and the United States, they really set precedents, they're like a model country with amazing laws and stuff. But then you see this kind of leadership and you start to question, okay, are these protections going to be feasible or not? And you mentioned something about American allies with regards to these trade wars, but a lot of American allies that are, I guess, somewhat aligned with American vision, doesn't really have a lot of, game or stronghold in any world economy. Say, for example, Philippines is like a very strong American ally when it comes to international trade. A few years ago, we see how copyright laws were enacted in the Philippines. A lot of fake luxury bags were raided in factories or like shops here. So that's part of the
No more fake DVDs in the Philippines.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess, when I think of trade and U.S. American allies for trade, I think it's mostly an extension of or the agents to enact the laws or the principles they do believe. But, if you look at the Philippines, what really, maybe not so much of products, not so much is good, because Philippines imports a lot of labor in the United States.
I know.
And now that they're essentially kicking out or deporting a lot of their farmers, and this is nothing new.
I know.
So I guess the way I see it in terms of U.S. and Philippine relationship, maybe it's the labor force that, we might expect to be tapped in terms of allyship, because we're talking about, it's a plan. They're saying that, okay, we need infrastructure, we need to get the industrialization back going, we need factory workers and whatnot, and no Americans are willing to do that. And where are they going to get workers?
Just insane to me, because in the United States, we do service jobs. Not like what I'm talking like, you have everything from lawyers and stockbrokers. Those business people, hotel maids, but we don't make stuff. We don't make stuff anymore. Ever since the war ended in 19 whatever in the 30s and 40s. The United States just doesn't make stuff. They didn't go that route. And they didn't need to go that route, because everything is made somewhere else.
Right.
And that led to the ability to be able to have $17 an hour or $20 an hour, minimum wage in some states, and people be able to have salaries that are, $80,000 a year and up, and that's middle class.
Right.
Because the rest of the world can work for, $200 a week or $300 a week, or in China, right now, China's up to whatever, $400 a week. But there's nobody in the United States that can work for $400 a week. You can't survive.
Yeah.
What if all that got cut off? And that's what, and I think you're absolutely right. Right now, it's a time to see if some countries can take advantage of this.
Right.
Exactly what you were saying. The United States may need a lot of people soon, because they just can't, they can't afford, they keep talking about, Donald Trump keeps saying, well, we're going to bring industry back to the United States. This is what we're going to do. The United States can't afford to open up industrial plants.
Right.
And if we did, how much would the stuff cost? Mm-hmm. So I think, this is where, especially countries like in the Philippines, and, this leads to, one of the other stories that has come up this week, which is the Europeans.
Okay.
And the Europeans right now, they're just floored by this trade war. They can't even believe that the United States is going against them. But the other thing that's happening in Europe, and I wanted to get to a little bit this week, is I've now read a lot of articles about that, specifically this week, that the Europeans are scrambling for what is going to come next. Because there's a lot of stuff that's been going on that's really bad, that, everything's been overshadowed by what's going on in the United States. But we haven't even talked about the fact that, 27 Ukrainians died, civilians died this week when the Russians shot a missile right into the middle of a town, just a town, not even a military target. And so the Europeans are now trying to decide what's going to be next with all these things that are going on. And so they have, this week, there's all these things that have come, printed guides on how to survive, stockpiling of stuff, food, weapons, mass evacuation drills, how to get out of a city, how to turn your garage into a bunker. Just things that, 2 years ago, a year ago, I would never have guessed that something like this would be coming up. How to run into, how to get to your nearest subway station and get underground if you're about to be attacked, or if you feel you're going to be attacked. And, they're preparing their citizens for war. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that the Secretary General of NATO this week said that it's time to shift to a wartime mindset, because the peace deal in Ukraine just keeps getting farther and farther away. And we don't know if it happens that we go to war, what side the United States is going to come down on.
That's a scary thought. But, I studied history in undergrad, and, if I were to be a historian 100 years from now, I would certainly pinpoint this timeline, this exact year as kind of like we're already at war, I feel. It may not be the ballistic, militaristic war, I think trade war is kind of pushing that, envelope a little bit. But in terms of the European countries and the European Union, I think this conflict with Ukraine and Russia really predisposed them to what could happen if this allyship with the US is starting to crumble or to be questioned or challenged by almost anything or something. It's scary to think, especially with NATO secretary saying that, and NATO has been existing for almost 80 years. So this is certainly a high alarm level.
I mean, NATO is basically run by the United States.
Yeah.
And the NATO countries are now saying, you know what, if we go to war, are they really going to, help us out? I mean, like it says in our contract, they're supposed to help us out.
Yeah, and this is exactly why I was bringing up that that time when Russia attacked Ukraine, because Germany is getting a lot of their energy from Russia, along with some other countries. So Germany has been noticeably quiet in terms of this war. So again, when we think about the allyship or alignment with EU, especially aligned with the United States, with this trade war, they're starting to see, okay, maybe it's not the right time to really lean in on them. What are we going to do? And
Germany's been flexing its muscles a little bit in the last literally 4 weeks. Mm-hmm. They've been saying stuff that you don't hear usually coming out of Germany. It's like, what, by the way, everybody, France is talking about moving. What they have in France is they have a line that's how far their nuclear stuff will go,
right.
And they're starting increasing that number. And Germany's kind of been part of this whole thing. Germany is for the first time is upping their weapon systems. They're talking about bringing back the draft of so everybody has to go through the military, and so and I think part of it has to do with the Germans were very upset with the way that the United States, the White House treated the president of Ukraine, and the fact that they were saying, well, okay, we have a peace deal in place. That peace deal is over, I think. I made a mistake. I think I said 27 civilians. Actually, it was 20 civilians. 20 civilians were killed this week, just the other day, by Russia. So if that kind of thing is happening, what peace deal? I don't even see where this is coming from. And people are still people in Russian occupied cities. They haven't left. They're staying there. They still believe that the Ukrainians are going to win. They still believe that the Europeans are going to come in and help them, and eventually it's going to be all right. But the stuff that's going on right now that I'm reading about the Ukraine, the fact that every time you write something on your phone, you have to erase the entire phone because a Russian may come and take your phone, and they may check your house. You have to make sure that there's nothing in your house. It's crazy, but a lot of the Ukrainians are holding fast. And as long as they keep until the last one is killed, I think the Iranians are not going to give up. Mm-hmm. And they're not going to fall for this peace deal that the United States has offered them. It's not going to happen. And the NATO alliance, they understand this. They know, what, they're not going to take this deal. Nobody believes that they should. Mm-hmm. Because if they take that deal, it's like we just gave up. The deal that the Trump administration has given them, I know, it's over. They're not going to take it. So they're just going to continue to fight. And so, the Secretary of NATO just 2 days ago said, listen, we think that Russia is going to jump over the line and start coming after other countries. And we are not going to sit by and wait for the United States to make a decision on what they're going to do. Mm-hmm. So, like I said, they already have pamphlets out, survival, how to survive. in case, we all of a sudden get cut off from everybody else. So I think that, this is something that, it's an interesting subject, but wow. I mean, like I said, a year ago, I wouldn't have thought. I mean, I was going to say something else, but it pushes it into another subject. I mean, I wouldn't believe, what I heard this week about deporting of people in the United States. We're going to pick this up next week. But I just wanted to, because you have such a good insight on this kind of thing. And I know that the Supreme Court of the United States made a decision on this week.
Recently, yeah.
And the fact that the United States is able to deport people based on tattoos. And they're not just deporting people, they're putting them in prisons in El Salvador, which is like the worst place you could possibly get put in prison. And part of the reason that El Salvador is doing this is the Trump administration is paying them $6 million to do it. But they deported a guy. And we'll get through this really quick. They deported this guy, 𝗪cie𝗿𝗀𝗱 Garcia. It was a Salvadorian, and he came from El Salvador. He was under the United States protection because the
ruling, I believe all of them, it's the unanimous decision from the Supreme Court.
I was really surprised that, because usually, it's a 5-4 split, whatever. But almost half of them always go for Trump, no matter what it is. But this is one of those things. It's like, oh no, wait a minute. This guy was married to a United States citizen, has a 5-year-old son, has no criminal record, and you just took him because of why? And they said the first reason, they bounced around a couple of different reasons. One, that, it was a clerical error. Man, that's a big clerical error. And the second one was, he's a member of MS-13. Okay, give us some evidence, any evidence at all that he is connected with the ruthless gang from the MS-13. Nothing. They have nothing. So the Supreme Court was like, all right, you need to bring him back. In the United States, the Trump administration says, okay, all right, well, we'd love to bring him back, but we can't because he's no longer in our jurisdiction.
Right. So as sad as that sounds, I think it's still a big win for immigrant rights movement in the United States. I think along with that news recently, there's a Columbia student international student was deported as well. That also, I believe his case was, I think it was like a state Supreme Court that ruled that. So there's an opportunity for him to take that case in the U.S. Supreme Court. But again, this is seeing law in action in real time, and we see how efficient, very rarely I say, how the efficient U.S. legal systems work and in favor, the underrepresented and the minority.
It was pretty fast.
Exactly. So it was very, very swift. I haven't read the ruling in general, and sometimes in terms of immigration cases, it's really hard to find those papers in public. If it's a U.S. Supreme Court, it's easier. The state Supreme Court is a little bit challenging to get, and the reason why I would love to read that is because sometimes a lot of these judges would explain why, or what's the reasoning. Is it the subject of the case? Is it a compelling case, or did they win because of technicality? Because those are the two important things when you look at cases. Is it the subjective part of the case that makes it compelling, or was it a technical case that won them their case? Because if it's technical, then we know that legislation can change that. If it's subjective, or if it's how the courts or the judges interpret a law, then we see how important judges are, whether they're elected or appointed. We see how important their perspectives are on these issues, if they're in this position.
I could tell you what the government's argument was.
Okay.
The government's implied that they could deport and incarcerate any person, including U.S. citizens, without legal consequence, so long as it does so before a court could intervene.
Okay, so that's highly constitutional.
and so the Supreme Court was like, no, I don't think so. That's not a very good argument. But speaking of arguments, I got one argument here now, and that is we have to go. I mean, unfortunately, we didn't even get to half of the stories that we were going to talk about today. But we hope that we will get to see Attorney Vaughn again, because we do enjoy so much talking to Attorney Vaughn. But for me and Vaughn, here on the World News Jam on DZRJ and Radio Bandito, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that everybody be back again. We hope that maybe Vaughn will be back again.
I will with a different Aloha shirt.
With a
'cause I feel like
That's right. We have him on for his apparel. It's such fine apparel. But in the meantime, everybody, please be safe out there, and we will see you again next week.
The views and comments of the hosts and guests are not necessarily those of the station.